Hey, what's going on guys? It's Tom Mason here, back with another video, and today we are talking about setting up the Nikon D850 or any new Nikon camera for wildlife photography. This is in response to a couple of questions that I got on my kind of unboxing video that I did of the D850 a little while back. So what I'm going to do is dive in and show you how I set up my menu settings within the camera to get the control and things that I'm looking for. Now, when setting up a camera, one of the most important things I'm trying to get is maximum external control. And what I mean from that is simply the fact that I don't really want to look in the menu. If I've got to look in the menu, I have to take my eye from the viewfinder. And if I take my eye from the viewfinder, I'm not looking at my subject and where I'm supposed to be. I'm not concentrating on the images I should be making. And so the whole point of setting up the camera in a certain way is so that I never have to take my eye, from that viewfinder for pretty much 99% of the time. I've got everything customized so that I can reach all of the features I need to use daily through an external button. The new ISO buttons, stuff like that, are great because it gives us more external controls, but I also assign pretty much all of the external buttons for different things so that when I'm out in the field, I can just keep my eye to the viewfinder, look at my subject and create pictures. And anything that is in the menu settings that I need to find, a lot of the time I will custom assign that to the My Menu settings so that I can dive in, find what I need in just like 2 clicks and then be straight back into shooting. Because if you're looking at the menu, you're not looking at what you're supposed to be photographing. So right, let's dive into the menu, jump on the back of the camera. I mean, not literally jump on the back of the camera, and I'll walk you through the menus and show you how I set things up. Right, so today I'm going to walk you through how I customize my menu and set up the camera. Now, of course, for different people, you might want to set things slightly differently to your personal preference, but this is how I do it. So I'm going to run you through really quite quickly. If you do have questions, drop them in the comments below. More than happy to answer a little bit more specifically, but I know I don't want to take hours over this and keep you here for days. So jumping into the playback menu, there's not a lot to change here, other than simply we can go into our playback display options. I have the focus point selected, highlight, RGB, histogram, and that's pretty much it. I tend to turn things off so that I don't have to kind of preview too many things, and I like to keep it as clean as possible. Image review is off because it saves battery life, and also I don't need to review every single picture after I've taken it. And then going down from that, the auto image rotation I keep on because if you're working, you've got the camera landscape and you take a portrait, you don't have to keep turning the camera to view it properly, and I just find that works for me. Now, going down into the photo shooting menu, this is where we start to customize a few things. The first one you'll see is that my file name is changed from the original DCM or whatever it is, and I've changed that to TM1. The simple reason for this is because I use multiple cameras, the D850, the D500, and I like to know which camera shot which, so TM1 and TM2 for my 2 different Nikons. Go back to there. And then coming down here, the primary slot selection, I've got the XQD, of course, for the maximum performance, but this is actually more governed by how you have the secondary slot function selected. If you have this set to backup, for example, what you're going to find is that even if you use a 400 megabyte per second XQD, if you put in a 100 megabyte SD, you're actually only going to get the performance of 100 megabytes because when it's backing up, obviously it's writing things to both cards and it can only go at that kind of bottleneck minimum speed. So I always have it on overflow to get the maximum performance. I mean, you don't pay £3,500 for a camera to kind of cripple its performance. And I know that as memory cards and SDs improve, we're going to get that performance, but at the moment I just find the XQD, I back up at the end of every day, so it's not too much of a problem. Now, coming down below that, we've got image area, and of course, the D850 is fantastic in FX, but of course you've got cropping options that's brilliant, and I'll talk about customizing that and getting to that a little bit later. But one thing that I do is actually turn the viewfinder mask display on. This basically grays out the crop and it makes it far easier to view which crop you're in and stuff like that. It makes composition far easier, so I like to turn that on. Going down again, I'm in raw quality, everything like that set. My white balance I always set to Kelvin, and this is basically because, of course, I'm shooting raw and I can customize things later when I'm editing in Lightroom, but largely if I'm doing video, because you can't change the white balance of a video later, using Kelvin gives me the maximum customization to make sure I get it right when I'm shooting. I use the neutral picture profile because, again, raw shooting, not too much of a problem. The color space, Adobe 1998. Again, active D lighting, this is all off, off, off. because again, I want to have all those processes and all that editing in the in my editing suite in Lightroom. Auto distortion control is off. Again, you know, I will do all of that in post-production. Now, going down to multiple exposure, these are certain things that I use at time to time. Multiple exposure, for example, HDR is just the worst. Interval timing shooter, focus shift shooting, and silent live view, they're all very useful. But largely I don't have to come into this menu because I set them on my custom menu that I'll show you a bit later. So that's pretty much the photo shooting menu finished. So coming down to the movie shooting menu, again, very much the same thing. My destination is the XQD to get the maximum performance. The image area I can change between FX and DX crop. That's very useful if you want to get some extra magnification on your subject. My frame rate, again, is it's actually 1080p HD at the moment, but I often use the 4K. But I change this out in a much quicker way by, again, using that custom My Menu setting that I'll show you later. Movie quality high, ISO settings I do manually, Kelvin white balance, flat profile for best grading, and then everything else is on normal, just because I find that works quite well. So moving down into the custom setting menu, this is where really a lot more of the customization happens. And of course, we're going to go into autofocus first. AFC, I have release and focus set because that's just how I like to work. In AFS, that I pretty much never use, I have autofocus as the primary concern rather than release. But for me in continuous, I actually want it to release the moment I want to take a picture. And of course, because I'm focusing with rear button focus, I find that that works quite well. Now in the AF focus tracking with lock-on, there are a few bits you can customize here. Now the block shot response basically means if your bird flies behind a tree, how long is it going to take before it pings onto the tree or misses the focus? And I find that 3 works quite well. It's a middle ground, so you know, sometimes you're like, oh damn, I wish that would locked a bit quicker. But there are times again when you don't want it to ping off the background if you're missing the point, it's stuck on a blade of grass or something. Now of course my subject motion is on erratic because working with birds and wildlife, they like to move. So we'll get out of that. 3D tracking I have off with face detection because I just never use it. Number of autofocus points is set to 55. You can reduce this to 15. That can be pretty useful for navigating quickly between the autofocus points, but with the joystick nowadays that's not too much of a problem, so I'll leave that with 55. I don't store them by orientation. When I turn the camera, I just want my autofocus point to stay exactly where I had it. Just makes life easy. And then of course, autofocus activation is off. I only want it to be on that AF on button on the back for rear button focus. You know, I want my shutter button to fire the shot and my autofocus button to do the autofocus. Now coming down below that, got a couple of more settings. Autofocus mode restrictions, I don't have any of those turned off. You know, for me, I just keep it as simple as possible. The focus point options, of course, you can have them illuminate or whatever. I just leave it to auto because it just works very well. They illuminate in the dark and they don't in the day. That is exactly as you want it to work. And coming down from that, the ISO setting value, all on a 3rd, basically, because that's just how I'm used to using in photography. So that's how I have it set. Matrix meeting with face detection, I have it on. But basically I'm not using a lot of matrix metering anymore because I'm using the highlight priority, but that's something maybe I'll talk about in another video. And then of course you can fine tune your optimal exposure. This is something that I personally don't do because I find the exposure to be really bang on with the new D850, but again, if you want to, the options there. Now coming down, we have the standby timer of 6 seconds. I find that's pretty good. You can set it to 4, but 6 works absolutely fine, and the battery life's absolutely brilliant on this. Self timer, I have it set to 5 seconds because if I do a landscape and forget a remote release, pretty handy. 5 seconds is enough time to lose those vibrations before it takes the shot. Again, if I need longer, I can just customize that pretty quickly. Monitor off delay, I have it set in different ways. 10 seconds for playback because a lot of the time, you know, if I'm scrolling through pictures, I'm using the D-pad and stuff like that, so it's not gonna ping off. Menus a minute, just in case I'm customizing stuff. And then the information displays 10 seconds, review 4 seconds, and live view 5 minutes. I keep live view on 5 minutes just in case you click it accidentally, you don't want it to drain your battery fully. Going down the continuous low mode shuttering speed, I have at 5. I've just left it as standard because basically I never go into continuous low, I always have it on high. something that you should definitely train yourself in as a photographer is how to take just a single picture, 2 pictures and 3 pictures with the shutter button, so you can always have it in high for those action moments that you can't predict. Coming down into the shooting and display, we've got ISO display. I have that off. I know which ISO I'm going to be set at, and I can just press the button and see it in the top. And actually when you press the button, it comes up in the viewfinder anyway, so as long as you know your controls and where they are, it's not too much of a problem. You know, front curtain shutter, that's all off. Sequence is on, and peaking is really handy. If you do a lot of manual focus and you're focusing in video, having the peaking on as red is fantastic. You can pick that focus out and get it absolutely perfect using live view. Really great feature of the new cameras. Viewfinder grid display, I have it off. I know some people really like a viewfinder grid, but to me, I just find it a little bit distracting. I like a really clear viewfinder, so that's off. And then coming down, the flash sync speed, I've got that on auto FP for fast sync. You know, if you're working with a Nikon speedlight and you go over that sync speed, you can actually use high-speed sync, so you could have 1,000th of a second, get a nice bit of fill flash, and I always leave that on because it's not too much of a problem, and I know when I'm scrolling over my max sync speed. Anyway, so coming down from here, the flash settings I not use too much because often on an external control, so not too much of a problem. The custom control assignment is really the big thing to do, and here I firstly have PV, you know, that's set to give my depth of field preview. I've always kept that, always loved it on cameras. Very handy if you're doing a landscape or anything, you know, just to show you what your depth's going to look like before you take the shot. Really handy, of course, if you're a macro shooter. Below that is the FN1 button. I used to assign this for cropping, but now I've changed it to use the virtual horizon function. This is great if you're setting up for a landscape shot or anything like that, or doing some video. Just get the camera steady, press that in, and it's going to show you if you are set up and level. That's really handy, so that's how I have it set. Below it, the FN2 button goes to my menu that I'll talk to you about in a minute. AF on, of course, is AF on, and then the sub selector moves my autofocus point when I move it. And below that is the press of the sub selector, and that is set to give me a different type of autofocus and initiate it. I talk about this in another video, so I'll link that up above me. Now, coming down below, the bracket button. Very rarely use bracketing, and when I do, I can find it quite simply, but I actually use the bracket button and turn to give me double exposure. Quite like shooting double exposures, so it's a really easy way to gain that external access to a control. I simply press the button on the side and scroll the wheel, and I can do a double exposure without having to go into the menu. Less menu time means more viewfinder time, and that is what I like. Now, below that is the movie control button, and this is what I've now changed and assigned to my cropping function. This gives me the ability to crop a 1.2 crop, a 1.5 crop, a square crop, and a lot of people would say, Tom, why don't you just shoot full frame? You know, you have the same speed no matter what with the D850, but I like to get it right in camera, to just dial in and get that crop and have a look at how it's going to come out. I just find it better to do it in camera as much as you can, and I find the little button on the top, again, it's really easy to reach when I'm looking through the viewfinder to set that in, and that's no problem whatsoever, and that's how I've got those custom controls set up. So coming out of the custom control buttons, below that we have the multi-selector button on. I have that to reset my autofocus point, so it goes back to the middle. That's what I like it to do. It makes navigating really easy and quick, and it's just how I've had it set for many years. Shutter speed and aperture locks, I don't use those. Customized control dials, don't need to do that, because I'm shooting manual, just, you know, aperture front, shutter speed, the rear button, release button to use dial. I never have this on because it frustrates the hell out of you. Basically, if you press it, if you press a button, it stays pressed down until you're finished with it and you press it again. I like to press, hold my buttons and do it, and as soon as I let go, it goes back to its shooting function. Reverse indicators if you want to, and the live view buttons, options that you can change and have those off. Below that, you can actually custom control all of those again for movie, but largely I find them to be in the right place. Now, in the setup menu, one of the things, of course, you can format your memory card, but you can do that externally. Time and date, of course, you're going to want to set because you don't want your pictures to be in the wrong order when you import them. Monitor brightness, I set as 0, and monitor color balance is absolutely fine as normal. Virtual horizon is off. Auto information display is auto. The AF fine tune is something that's great if you have a bit of a problem with the focus on your lenses and want to get that perfect. Moving through that, you've got image comment off. I don't use that, but copyright information I do use. I always attach my artist information, just so I know my name's attached to every camera, every picture I take. And then of course the touch controls are on because it's really handy to use the touch functionality of these cameras. Although, you know, I still just navigate with the D-pad because I'm just so used to it. Below that, we have the retouch menu. pretty much never used that in my entire life, so we'll skip that. And then we go into My Menu. That is fantastic because basically what you can do is you can add and remove items that you're going to want to get to frequently. And here you can see that I've got my frame rate, time-lapse movie, interval timing shooter, focus shift shooting, that is basically like a focus stack, and then multiple exposure. I can get to all of these just one button. All I have to do is simply press the FN2 button and they're there, and I can navigate to them really quickly. Again, it's about minimizing time and adding external controls to getting to things really quickly, and I find My Menu really handy for that. And I definitely say take the time, think through the menu, and use My Menu to add items that you're going to want to navigate to regularly. For me, you know, the mirror lockup for cleaning and stuff like that is really great to just be able to find really quickly with no problems. But that is pretty much it for how I go about setting up my menu. You know, the whole thing is about having maximum external control, making sure that, you know, the buttons on the camera are going to give me everything so I can look through the viewfinder and not have to worry about navigating into any menus and just concentrate on my shooting. Right, so that was a quick look at the menu and how I set things up for wildlife photography. If you've got any questions, if I went over things too fast, just drop me a comment below. I'm more than happy to answer any questions about setting things up, why I do certain things. If you've got any tips, pointers that you think, Tom, there's this feature that you must know about, drop it in the comments below. Love to hear your thoughts. You know, setting up a camera is really important for wildlife photography, not only because you can get the most out of it, get those features to be really accessible, because taking the time to, you know, sit, learn and customize your camera also gives you the added benefit that when you go out into the field, you're going to know where everything is. Now, anyone who comes from like a previous Nikon camera, you're going to be pretty at home with the D850, D500, whatever your next camera is, because the layout is very similar. But one of the things, you know, just nailing in and making sure you know all those features is a really good thing to do before you step out the door. And I always make sure I've set my camera to exactly how I want it before I even go on that first shoot. So hopefully there was a couple of tips there, a couple of things that you might have, features that you found out about the camera. Again, as always, if you've got any questions about this video or any of my other videos or wildlife photography in general, drop it in the comments below. More than happy to get back to you. Thank you very much for watching, and join me again soon when we'll probably be going out on location for some more wildlife photography. Thank you very much, guys, and see you soon.